everyone, and welcome aboard Clipper Liberty Bell, November 6518 Charlie, and welcome to part 2 of the Ultimate Douglas Super 6 Masterclass. This part of the class is going to be a flight deck overview. We're going to look at the flight deck, I'm going to show you where everything is, what everything is, and a basic look at some of the systems that are in here. Without further ado, let's get started with the flight deck overview. As you can see, this is what the flight deck of the Super 6 looks like. There are no screens in this flight deck apart from the EFB on the left captain's side there, and this is a 3-person flight deck crew. Captain on the left, first officer on the right, and flight engineer sat in the middle in this fold-out seat here. In a traditional aircraft, there would be a flight engineer station. Not in this aircraft. The flight engineer just wedges himself in here, which looks very uncomfortable, but it got the job done, I guess. On some longer flights, particularly those over water, a 4th crew member would be required. That would be the navigator. He or she likely sat or stood in this area of this aircraft here, judging by the radio altimeter there below that shelf. Let's get started now with the flight deck overview, starting on the pedestal down here. These old school radios that you see on here are all not modeled in this PMDG simulation of the aircraft. In the left middle, we have the gyro pilot. Calling this the automatic pilot is acceptable, however not recommended because it is not an autopilot. It is a gyro pilot. Although I will say, even though it is a gyro pilot, it is quite advanced for its time. This is the turn wheel here. This is the bank of the aircraft. This is the pitch wheel. It is not a vertical speed adjustment. It just does the pitch. This is the engagement switch. This is the altitude control switch. This is the selector dial. This is the status light, and this is the fault light. The status light indicates that the gyro pilot is on and working. The fault light indicates that there is a fault with it or that it is deactivated. The selector switch has 3 positions: gyro pilot, localizer, and approach. Gyro pilot is used for manual adjustment, so manual turn and heading, manual pitch adjustment, etc. Localizer is for flying to a VOR, or if you're using the GPS, flying a GPS route. And approach mode is used for ILS approaches. Yes, this plane can fly an ILS approach with the autopilot. There is no auto land, but ILS approaches are fair game in this aircraft, and the autopilot can fly them. This display on here displays kind of what the gyro pilot is doing with the rudder, aileron, and elevators. This dial in the middle here, I believe, adjusts the aileron trim of the gyro pilot itself. Not necessarily the actual aileron trim, but I believe that's what that's for. I could be wrong though. Down here on the very bottom is the gyro pilot clutch engagement lever. The gyro pilot won't actually work and apply any force to the flight controls without that clutch being engaged. So the proper engagement for the gyro pilot is gyro pilot engagement on, followed by the clutch, so that way the gyro pilot can apply authority to the flight controls. Moving on down, we have the landing gear lever in the center, that big red lever in the center. That's the landing gear lever. There is down, neutral, and up positions. On the right here, we have the flap lever. There's settings up, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, and down. Those are in degrees. Down is 50 degrees. On the left side, this big lever on the left side is the gust lock that locks the flight controls in their place. Useful if there's gusty winds or during taxi. I quite like to have that engaged during taxi to prevent accidental bumping of flight controls during the taxi phase. Over here is the mixture controls for each engine. This is a pretty easy mixture. There's auto rich, auto lean, and idle cutoff, and that's it. This 5th lever on the left is the mixture lock switch. That actually locks the mixture in the current setting to prevent any accidental bumps. Over on the right here, we have the carb air temperature switches. These adjust the temperature of the air that's entering the carburetors. In most cases, leaving them in the fully down coldest position is sufficient, as colder air is a little bit more dense, so you can get a little bit more power out of the engines. The emergency hydraulic system selector switch and cutoff here, and the emergency hydraulic pump selector valve are all here. This switch guarded, this lever, and this lever here. These, to my knowledge, are only used in emergencies. I've never personally had to use them myself. Moving on up, we have the fuel tank selectors on the left front here. These select which tank you want to take the fuel from and send to the engines. Alternate tank in the center. Main tank is forward position, and no fuel is all the way down. There are 8 throttles. There's only 4 engines. It's just there's 2 sets, one for the captain, one for the first officer. This red lever, labeled L, is the throttle lock, very similar to the mixture lock lever that we looked at earlier. This locks the throttle. I like to call that my auto throttle lever. This P lever here, this aircraft has variable pitch propellers, very advanced. This is how you adjust the pitch of the propellers. You move this back and forth to adjust the pitch, and that controls the engine RPM. This is the cross-feed selectors for fuel cross-feed. Transferring fuel between fuel tanks in this aircraft is actually prohibited. Instead, cross-feeding out of different tanks into all the engines is what you would do to balance fuel. There are 2 positions. There's same side, and all the way down is both side. For example, if you just want to take engine 1 out of tank number 2 and also have tank 2 feed engine number 2, you do same side cross feed like this, and then you can have tanks 1 and 4 feed the right side and the left side engines. If you wanted to take fuel out of just tank number 1, you would use both side cross feed and select tank number 1 like that, and that would take fuel out of just main tank number 1. In the middle here, these orange lights up top are the prop reversing lights. That is how those would indicate when the props are reversed and are applying reverse force. The blue lights that are illuminated are the prop sync lights. I'm not really too sure what they indicate, but I believe they indicate whether the props are synced to each other or not. If the props were unsynced, these levers here is how you would adjust the RPM of the engines individually to sync them back up. This button is the resync button. It resyncs the props. This lever here, or I guess switch, is the prop sync switch. Basically what it is there's 3 settings. There's number 3, manual, and number 2. That controls which engine the other props sync to, either engine number 3 or engine number 2. Traditionally, engine number 3. This red lever is the prop reverse lever. You select that down, and then you can reverse the engines, and we can see that the prop reverse lights will illuminate. What I love, though, is when you return the throttles back to idle, the lever automatically disables itself, which is very, very helpful. Moving on over to the captain's side panel, we have the traditional 6-pack gauges here, airspeed indicator, artificial horizon, altimeter, turn coordinator. This is a VOR or DME, distance measuring equipment, and the vertical speed indicator. This is ADF indicator. This is a VOR indicator. This is ADF number 1. And this is the magnetic compass. This is the outer, middle, inner glide slope markers. These lights here are the water injection pressure safe pump lights. They will illuminate when the water injectors are working and are active, and the pressure is sufficient. This switch here is the gyro slaving cutoff. This would be used to disconnect the gyro from the compass, or disconnect the compass from the main compass in the aircraft. And then to adjust the heading of, I believe it's this compass, you would direct gyro, and then you can adjust it with these levers here. This is actually adjusting the VOR and the compass as well. Instead, you slave it to the compass there. This is the clock. This is a DME indicator. It displays distance to the VOR, your ground speed, and your minutes. Very useful for using navigation like I do, which is VOR navigation in this aircraft. This switch toggles between transponders 1 and 2. Typically, number 1 is captain is the pilot flying. This is the transponder down here. It is a Bendix transponder, and this is a comm audio panel also made by Bendix. Over on the left here, we have the nose wheel tiller, is this wheel here. This is the windshield wiper control, cylinder, circle, whatever you want to call it. The windshield wiper control is here. And these two dials up here control the panel and map lighting for the captain. The captain's map light is the top one, and it does say white on there. However, it is actually a red light. Very useful when flying at night. And then we have the EFB over here. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just like another EFB in the 737, Phoenix A320, and those other planes. In the center, we have the engine gauges as well as other items. The BMEP gauges are up top. These are brake mean effective pressure. Typically, you would set cruise power using your BMEP gauges. Your manifold pressure gauges are here. There is 1 and 2 on the left, and 3 and 4 on the right. It's 2 engines per gauge. This is the fuel flow gauges. Fuel flow is measured in pounds per hour. This aircraft uses the imperial unit system of measurement. These are the RPM gauges. This is the flap position indicator gauge. This is the free air gauge, or the external air temperature gauge. This is the cylinder head temperature gauges. These are the water pressure gauges. These are the water injection pressure gauges. These are the fuel pressure gauges. These lights are the low fuel and low oil pressure lights. These are the low oil pressure. These are the low oil pressure gauges. Excuse me. Oil temperature gauges. Carb air gauges. And if I said that this was wrong, this is the cylinder head temperature gauges. I don't know whatever I said, but this is the cylinder head temperature gauges. Over on the first officer side, it is almost identical to the captain's side. It's just arranged differently. The only thing that's different is there's the low fuel pressure warning isolation switches. The low oil or fuel pressure warnings would be on. Turn these on, move these, and it will disable those warnings. And then we have the landing gear indication lights here as well. This row of red toggles is the fire suppression for the engines, baggage, and heater compartments, as well as hydraulic compartments and other stuff. Very similar to how they are on the 737 and other aircraft. The wheel here in the center on top of the Glareshield is the rudder trim wheel, and the indicator is right here for it. It's a very odd place for it, but it works and gets the job done, I guess. Moving on up to the eyebrow panel, we have the old school radios here. If you were to use the GPS, I don't, but if you do use the GPS, it would be where this one is right here in the center. We have the landing lights selector. There are not 4 landing lights, there is 2. This is the on-off for the landing lights, and this extends or retracts the landing lights. These are the cowl flap selector dials to adjust the position of the cowl flaps. Right here are the engine supercharger control switches. There are 2-speed superchargers in these engines, and this is how you set between high and low gearing on the supercharger. Low gearing is used up to about 16,000 feet or so, in that range, maybe 15, 16, 17,000 feet if you're really light. And then you would toggle high gear up on that as up to the service ceiling of 25,000 feet. Moving on up, we have the fuel gauges, 8 of them, 8 tanks. 33,072 pounds is the maximum fuel capacity. Main tanks are on the bottom, alternate tanks are on the top. They do have varying sizes and varying quantities, that's why they vary in quantity. The fuel quantity test switch is right here. Up, test the alternate fuel tank gauges, and down, test the main tank fuel gauges. This is the pitot and scoop heater amp meter selector dial, as what it's called here. This selects which electric heating element you want to have enabled on the electric heating. This will be like wing scoops, the leading edges of the wing, the belly scoop, the belly air scoop, the captain and first officer pitot ports, and the comb air scoop. And then to actually enable it, you select a setting you want, and then turn it on with this. However, I'm going to turn it off because the maximum ground operation for it is 1 minute. And this is the amp gauge for that, when it's active. You turn it on, it has amps. This gauge is the anti-icing fluid quantity. It displays a maximum quantity of 16.5 US gallons. The anti-icing fluid is used for the carburetors, believe it or not. It is the carb anti-icing fluid quantity. It is isopropyl alcohol, and when enabled, the carb de-icers, which are down here, it dumps isopropyl alcohol into the carburetor to remove any ice contamination. These two gauges here are the engine oil quantity gauges. There is an oil tank in each engine as well as an auxiliary oil tank. Each engine holds 36 US gallons of oil, and the auxiliary oil tank holds 26 US gallons of oil. If engines run low on oil, for example, you would transfer from the auxiliary oil tank into the engine oil tanks, but not exceeding 20 US gallons. This is the hydraulic reservoir. We are full on hydraulic fuel. A normal flight, it would be here. If it's down here, it needs to be refilled. Over here on the right, we have the water injection quantity gauges for the water injector pumps. There's a total of 36 US gallons. It is also a mixture of water and alcohol. It's about probably a 50-50 mix of water and isopropyl alcohol, to my knowledge. Each engine has 9 US gallons of water at its disposal. And again, total 36 US gallons. These two gauges right here are the supercharger gearbox oil pressure and oil temperature gauges for the cabin-driven superchargers that are on this aircraft. The cabin superchargers control the cabin pressure. They pump compressed air into the cabin to pressurize the cabin. To the left side here, there are two sections, this upper one and this lower one. I'm going to go over the lower one first. This is the heater fuel crossfeed switch. This is not modeled in the aircraft, as well as all these switches here, they are not modeled. This is the cabin heater switch. This is the airfoil heater switch. These are your gas-powered, yes, gas-powered heaters that warm up the cabin and the airfoil, which includes the wings and the tail in icing conditions. When these are toggled on, these dials display the temperature and the fuel pressure and the temperature of them. This is the prop de-icer. This is electrical in each of the props. Carb de-icers, as I said originally. They will dump the carb de-icing fluid into the carbs to remove any ice contamination. If there was an overheat or a fire in one of these heaters, these are the controls for those CO2 bottles right here. Moving on up, we have the fire detection test switches, or buttons, I guess. And this plane has the most obnoxious fire bell ever. Take a listen to this. Yeah, that's pretty loud, but it will get your attention. Absolutely, it will get your attention. This is the cockpit temperature dial. It selects the cockpit temperature. There's no display or temperature, it just does it. This is the white cockpit floodlight dial. This is the radio backlight dial. This controls the amount of backlighting on the radios. And this is the windshield heat and radome anti-icing defogging dial. There are several settings. This is basically your windshield heat switch. It's not on or off like in a 737 or something like that. There are different temperatures that you would use it at. If it's above 10 degrees Celsius, you turn it off. If it's 10 to 0 degrees, you have this setting. If it's 0 degrees to minus 40 degrees, you have that setting. If there's imminent ice buildup or there's like icing conditions, you have an anti-icing mode, which is maximum heat applied to the windshield and also the radome as well, which is very nice. Over to the right, we have again two panels. We'll go with this first one here. This is mostly cabin pressure related. Cabin differential pressure up top, cabin's supercharger airflow rates, cabin altitude controller, and cabin climb or descend rate. The cabin vertical speed indicator, if you will. This is the cabin altitude manual pressure setting. Guard. Down and guarded is automatic cabin pressure. Up and unguarded is manual cabin pressure. This is how you would increase and decrease the cabin altitude. And this cooling turbine cools the cabin. As you can see up here on the right, I can adjust the temperature of the cabin, and this cooling turbine will cool it down. These displays and dials here control the generators. They don't control the generators, they just display various generator and battery related information. I typically just leave it as it is. It's pretty good. Moving on up to the upper overhead panel, and then the final will be the very upper overhead panel. We have mostly important stuff here. We have the cockpit lighting and external lighting switches over here. We have the nav light switch here. This is the wing illumination light switch, or the wing inspection lights, which, by the way, they suck. The halogen light hadn't been invented yet, so they are most likely incandescent lights, as well as all the other lights that are on this aircraft. This is the beacon light, seatbelt sign, no smoking sign, circuit breaker panel light, and the entrance lights, which are back here, these lights over here for the flight deck entrance. This is the upper panel light left side red flood, and this is the right side red flood. You can't see it because it's too bright outside, but when flying at night, you would do the right side and the left side. I don't know why they're independent, but they are. This is the engine instrument panel light. Again, it's in red. There is a white one. It's up here, but it does the whole panel flood, not just the engine instruments. This one only does the engine instruments, and then the FO and captain's panels have their own separate red floodlights. The white one up here is the main panel lights, which is the whole thing. These are the inverters and engine instrument power regulator switches. The inverters are for flight deck power, flight instrument power, etc. These are the fuel boost pumps. There's main and alternate tanks. This is the wheel well light switch. I don't even know if this plane has wheel well lights. I turn it on and there's no light difference on the outside, so I don't even know if this plane has wheel well lights, but there is a wheel well light switch. This is the emergency flight deck power switch. This is the takeoff and cabin low pressure warning cutout. So if the cabin was pressurized on the ground, for example, there would be a warning, or the cabin pressure had a malfunction, that would be to cut off the warning for that. This is the toggle switch between the battery of the aircraft and ground power. I'm currently running on ground power, so I have it set to ground power. When the engines are turned on and the generators are on, which are these switches here, these are the engine generators, you would switch to plane battery, and then it would take from the batteries of the plane, which would be charged by the engine generators. These red switches here that are in this guard are the prop feather switches. These feather the props. This switch here is the automatic feathering, which goes with these green lights here. It is the automatic feathering. It is always turned on for takeoff, not so much for landing, but that is there just in case of an engine failure on takeoff. To test the automatic feathering, you can use these lights, not these lights, these switches here that test the automatic feathering. This is the magneto switch. This aux blower, I'm not really sure what that's for, but I think it's another blower or fan for the flight deck. This is the emergency exit light guard switch. Guard is armed. This is the engine ignition selector. It is impossible to start more than one engine at a time with this aircraft. This is number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these are your engine starter controls right in here. You got prime, start, and boost. The proper starting order for this aircraft is 3, 4, 2, 1, in that order. And by the way, I have never actually had to use the aux blower switch. I've always left it in the off position. Moving on up to the aft upper overhead, whatever you want to call this. We have the prop de-ice amp meter selector switch. When using the prop de-icer, you can select which engine you want to see the amps from. If you suspect a prop de-ice fault, you can see which one has lower amps or is not working at all with this. As I have previously mentioned, the auxiliary oil tank, this is how you would transfer the oil out of it into the engine oil tank. Left outboard, left inboard, right outboard, and then you would select these to pump or transfer with this switch here. But again, if you have more than 20 gallons of oil in each of the engine tanks, you're not supposed to transfer any oil. This up here, these guarded switches are the emergency prop de-ice switches, but I don't think they are actually modeled in this PMDG simulation. But I've never personally had to use the emergency ones. I don't even think they're modeled, like I said. This big thing in the center is actually the floodlight for the third crew member. It's the map light. It's red. It's controlled with this dial here. These row of switches here are the water injection pumps, off and on for your water injectors. These row of 8 switches in this cover is the circuit breakers for the fuel boost pumps. If you want to not have fuel boost pumps, which are pretty important actually, you can disable them here. It's pretty interesting. This row of guarded switches is the engine spark, advance, or retard switches. I don't believe these are actually modeled. I can go into more detail on this system in the next part, but I think that this is used to retard engine ignition in cruise flight, but I don't believe it's actually modeled in this sim because I've used it and no changes in the engine were observed. So I don't think it's actually modeled, but that's what it would be used for, I believe. I'll touch more on that in part 3. On the right here, these row of switches is the oil dilution system. This pumps a little bit of fuel into the engine oil. This is really only used in cold, like really cold starting conditions to help the engines ignite, basically. This is a panel that shows V1 takeoff and landing speeds in the DC-6A and B. This is the B variant. Finally, back here, we have the circuit breaker panel. These are all the circuit breakers on this aircraft. There's also some here as well. This port right here is actually the sextant port. This would be where the navigator would poke his sextant out to get a star observation to use celestial navigation, which I have used. I have done a flight with celestial navigation. Well, everyone, that covers everything in the flight deck. That's where everything is, and that's what everything is. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully, this will help anyone who struggles with knowing where everything is in the Super 6, and you'll be able to start flying it soon. I'll see you in the skies. Goodbye.